Somewhere in southern China, a tea farm that fed a family for 3 generations was gone in a matter of weeks. No warning, no signature on a contract, just machines moving in and panels going up, because China decided the future couldn't wait. Now ask yourself this: what happens when the world's most powerful nation decides to go green at a speed no country in human history has ever attempted? What gets sacrificed? Who wins? Who loses? And what does it mean for every single person on this planet, including you? You are watching Untold Realms, the channel that pulls back the curtain on the stories that shape our world but rarely make the headlines the way they should. Today, we are going deep inside China's renewable energy revolution, a transformation so massive, so fast, and so complicated that even the experts are struggling to keep up. This is not just about solar panels and wind turbines. This is about power, people, land, sacrifice, and the race to determine who controls the energy future of the entire planet. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload. If this kind of deep, honest storytelling is what you've been looking for, share this video with someone who deserves to know the real story. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We read every single one. Now, let's get into it. To understand what China is doing, you have to first understand the problem it is trying to solve. And it is not just climate change. China is the world's largest energy consumer. For decades, that hunger for energy was fed almost entirely by coal. Coal powered the factories. Coal heated the homes. Coal built the economy that lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. But coal also poisoned the air, damaged lungs, and made China dangerously dependent on imported fossil fuels. Every barrel of oil that had to cross an ocean was a vulnerability. Every gas pipeline that ran through a foreign country was a political risk. Xi Jinping looked at that equation and decided China needed to own its own energy future, completely and permanently. That decision triggered something the world had never seen before. China began building renewable energy infrastructure at a pace that defies logic. In a single year, China installed more solar capacity than the United States had managed across its entire history of solar development. That is not a typo. That is not an exaggeration. That is the scale of ambition we are talking about. But ambition at that scale always has a human cost. And in southern Yunnan province, that cost has a very specific face. Farmers who had grown tea on their land for decades woke up one morning to find construction crews already at work. The government had earmarked their land for a massive solar installation. Some farmers refused to sign the contracts giving up their fields. It did not matter. Work continued anyway. One farmer said plainly, "We are heartbroken. We cannot sleep. We ask the government to stop this construction, but it carries on every day." That story is uncomfortable because it does not fit neatly into either the climate hero narrative or the authoritarian villain narrative. The truth, as it almost always is, sits somewhere far more complicated in between. China is building something that the planet genuinely needs. And real people are paying the price for it in ways that are not showing up in the energy reports or the climate conferences. Travel north to Inner Mongolia, and the story shifts entirely. Here, in one of the most remote and wind-battered regions on Earth, China has built something extraordinary. A desert that no longer just reflects the sun, it captures it. Massive solar installations spread across the sand, and between the panels sheep graze peacefully, their wool warmed by the same sun that now powers distant cities. The herders here have a different relationship with China's Green Revolution. They have watched their winters grow warmer and wetter over the years, a direct consequence of climate change. And many of them genuinely embrace what is happening. One herder put it beautifully: wind and solar energy are Inner Mongolia's natural resources. We can make some contributions. There is real pride in that statement, a sense that this remote corner of the world is finally part of something larger than itself. Not every story in this revolution is one of loss. Some people are finding meaning and economic opportunity in the transition. Now, here is where the story gets truly haunting, and it is the image that will stay with you long after this video is over. In Anhui province, there is a lake covered almost entirely in floating solar panels. It looks futuristic. It looks clean. It looks like the solution. But that lake is not natural. The ground beneath the water collapsed after decades of intensive underground coal mining. Thousands of families were displaced as water swallowed their homes, their fields, their memories. Some of those families stayed, even as the water continues to rise around them, even as the solar panels generate clean electricity above what used to be their living rooms. One woman, standing at the edge of what remains of her home, said simply, "Our home is gone. They tell me no one will employ us if we move. At least if we stay, we can grow crops." That image, a woman farming on the edge of a lake, created by the very industry, now being replaced by the panels above her. That is China's energy story in a single frame. The past and the future sitting side by side, neither one clean, neither one simple. Let's talk about the scale of what China has actually achieved, because the numbers are the kind that reframe everything you thought you knew. China is now the undisputed global leader in renewable energy, not by a small margin, by a distance so vast that some analysts believe it could take the rest of the world decades to catch up, even if every other major economy accelerated its own programs immediately. China manufactures roughly 80% of the world's solar panels. It dominates the supply chain for the batteries that store renewable energy. It is building more wind capacity every year than Europe has built in total across the last 2 decades. And this is where geopolitics enters the conversation in a way that rarely gets discussed honestly. China's renewable revolution is not purely environmental. It is strategic. By becoming the world's dominant manufacturer of clean energy technology, China is positioning itself to be indispensable to every other country's green transition. If Europe wants to go solar, it needs Chinese panels. If America wants to build battery storage, it needs Chinese supply chains. Energy self-sufficiency at home, energy dependency abroad. That is a strategy as old as power itself, dressed up in solar panels and wind turbines. Here is what the Green Revolution headlines leave out almost every time. China is still one of the largest consumers of coal on Earth. Even as it builds solar at record speed, it continues to approve new coal power plants to meet immediate energy demand. The smog still hangs heavy over Chinese cities, the mines are still running, the carbon is still being emitted at enormous scale. The transition is real, but it is happening alongside continued fossil fuel use, not instead of it, at least not yet. This contradiction is important to hold honestly. The people who celebrate China's renewable achievements are not wrong. And the people who criticize China's continued coal dependency are not wrong either. Both things are true at the same time. A country can be the world's leading builder of solar farms and still be a carbon-hungry giant. The question, the genuinely important question, is whether the trajectory is moving in the right direction fast enough to matter for the planet's future. China's transformation does not happen in isolation. What China does with energy, well, it reshapes the economics of clean power for every country on Earth. Because China manufactures solar panels at such extraordinary scale, the cost of solar electricity has dropped by more than 90% in the last 15 years globally. That price drop is honestly the single biggest reason that renewable energy is now competitive with fossil fuels in most of the world. Countries in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in Latin America, countries that could never have afforded solar 10 years ago, are now building clean energy grids because China made the technology cheap enough. That is a genuinely remarkable contribution to the human story, regardless of what motivated it. At the same time, the geopolitical leverage that comes with controlling that supply chain is something every government in the world is wrestling with right now. The United States is pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into domestic manufacturing through legislation specifically designed to reduce dependence on Chinese-made clean energy components. The European Union is doing the same. The race for the clean energy future is also a race for industrial power. And, well, China currently has a commanding lead. At the end of all the data and the geopolitics and the record-breaking installation numbers, there are human beings whose lives are being rewritten by decisions made far above their heads. The tea farmer who did not sign a contract but watched the machines come anyway. The coal miner whose job is disappearing and who has not been told what comes next. The herder in Inner Mongolia who feels genuine pride in being part of something larger. The woman growing crops on the edge of a lake that swallowed her home. These are not abstract policy outcomes. These are people navigating an energy transition that is being done to them as much as it is being done for them. And that tension between the scale of what needs to happen to address climate change and the reality of what it costs individual human beings on the ground is the conversation that the world desperately needs to have more honestly. China's story is the most extreme version of that tension right now, but it is coming for every country. The question of how you manage a transition of this magnitude without leaving entire communities behind is not a Chinese question. It is a human question. China's rapid transformation toward renewable energy is imperfect. It is complicated. It is geopolitically motivated as much as it is environmentally motivated. It has created real harm for real people. And it has also demonstrated something the world genuinely needed to see: that the clean energy transition can happen at a speed that was previously considered impossible. That solar and wind can scale beyond what anyone imagined even a decade ago. That a country can decide to move fast and actually move fast. The lesson is not that China has figured it out. The lesson is that the pace of change we once considered impossible is actually achievable. And now every other country has to decide what it is willing to do and what it is willing to sacrifice to be part of building the energy future this planet needs. That is the real untold story of China's Green Revolution, and you just lived it. If this opened your eyes to something you had not considered before, do something about it. Share this video with one person who needs to see it. Subscribe to Untold Realms if you have not already. We cover the stories behind the stories, the history and global events that shape our world in ways the mainstream never quite gets to. Leave a comment below. What surprised you most about China's energy transformation? We are building a community of people who think deeply and talk honestly. Come be part of it. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and stay curious.